Chapter 15 Alone. With the factory bombed out and complete chaos all around, there was nothing for us to do. Did that mean that we were useless? Oh, I hoped not. We were loaded onto the train in haphazard fashion, wounded and uninjured altogether, and taken back to the work camp. Xenia sat beside me. Bibi and Natalia huddled together across the aisle, whispering in low voices. There were so few people on the train that Katerina was stretched across one of the benches, fast asleep. Mary sat by herself, staring out the window as the wrecked city and bombed-out countryside chugged by. I think we were all still in shock from our close call with death. My mind was spinning with the image of that blonde girl. Could it have been Larissa? Was my mind playing tricks on me? If it was Larissa, at least she was alive. But alive and living as a Nazi? It would be better for her to be dead. I was confused and exhausted, hungry and sad. I closed my eyes and rested my head on Xenia's shoulders. A deafening double bang jolted me awake. The train shuddered to a screeching halt. My eyes flew open. Katerina fell off her bench with a thud. For long moments, nothing else happened, but then the compartment filled with billowing smoke. Another bomb? Had we been hit? I ran to the door and pulled on the handle, but it was bolted from the outside. I pounded on it. Let us out! Let us out! A young boy in civilian clothing, but with a Hitler Youth armband, ran up to our door. He stretched up his hand, but he was too short to reach the bolt. Smoke enveloped us. I watched out the window as he pulled himself up the ridges of the door as if he were climbing a tree. He unlatched the bolt, then jumped back down onto the ground, running to the next car to open that door the same way. I pushed our door open and fresh air rushed in. Xenia helped Katerina up off the floor, and we all tumbled out, stumbling and tripping in our haste to get away from the train as quickly as we could. I looked up and down the tracks and saw many gaunt and weary slaves, frightened and tired, some still bleeding, being ordered about by boys who didn't seem much older than I was. It was complete chaos. The 6 of us stood in a cluster, not knowing what to do. I'm not sticking around, said Mary. In one swift movement, she tore off her OST badge and threw it onto the ground. She tugged Bibi by the arm. Come on, she urged. Bibi ripped off her badge too, and the two made a run for it. Where would they go? There was no place safe from the bombing, and escaped slaves would be shot on sight. But I envied their bravery. I turned to Xenia. Should we go too? She had a terrified look in her eyes. I don't know what we should do. In our relatively new blue flannel dresses, we looked less like slave laborers than many of the others, but our scraggly hair and gaunt appearance was a clear giveaway. We were close enough to the camp that we could see the guardhouses. Natalia looked from Xenia to me. I'm not standing around here, she said. The train could explode any time now. She looped her hand through the crook of Katerina's elbow, and they began to slowly walk in the direction of camp, Katerina limping with her sprained ankle. I followed them. Xenia followed me. Walking with slippery shoes in the winter is difficult, so I kept my eyes to the ground and tried to avoid the slicks of ice. The four of us were just one link of a chain of people slowly making their way back to the work camp, the smoking train at our side. When we passed the engine car, I paused for a brief moment to stare. The way the bomb had smashed into it made it look like a toy train that a willful child had stomped into bits. Flames licked along the sides and black oily smoke filled the air in a tall spiral above it. I covered my mouth and hurried on. Natalia was right. The whole thing could explode at any moment. With each shivering step I took, I thought of that pampered girl who looked like my sister. When we finally reached the camp entrance, I felt like a walking block of ice. It was mid-afternoon and still light out, but the camp was brighter than daylight. It took me a moment to realize that flames dotted numerous points in the camp. A bomb had hit here too? Julie ran to our straggling group as we passed the gates. "You're safe," she cried. "I can hardly believe it." She wrapped one arm around me and another around Xenia. "The camp was bombed as well?" I asked. Julie nodded. "Your barracks was demolished. Thank goodness it was empty at the time." "What else was hit?" "The laundry," said Julie. "Ingy is dead." I felt a lurch of sadness in my heart. Ingy had sometimes been kind. "The officers' mess was also hit," said Julie, "but none of the officers were killed." Terrible as it may sound, deep down I wished that the mess could have been hit during mealtime. It would have given me great satisfaction if at least some officers had died while they were stuffing their faces. As we walked past the flaming mass of wood that had been the officers' canteen, a slave dashed out of the burning building, his hair smoking and a bundle cradled in his arms. I heard the crack of a rifle shot. The man fell, scattering the items that he had been holding. Half a ham and a few raw eggs. I looked in the direction that the shot had come from. Officer Schmidt glared at us and cocked his rifle. "I'd think twice about looting," he said. All that food going up in flames while people were starving. It seemed obscene. Julie led us to the hospital. "I'm going to give you first aid myself," she said. "The doctors and nurses have fled." She ushered us into a room that was so crowded with wounded laborers that there were barely room on the floor for us to sit. But I was thankful nonetheless. All those people meant the room was warm. Julie brought over a basin of water and a bottle of disinfectant. She cleaned surface scratches on my face and scalp that I didn't even know I had. Then she gingerly removed my thin shoes and washed my feet with warm water and disinfectant. As they thawed out, I could feel sharp needles of pain in the soles of my feet, my ankles, and the joints of my toes. My feet were puffy and red, but at least now they were warming up. When she was finished, she took a clean white bed sheet and tore it into strips. "Wrap your feet in this before you put your shoes back on," she said. "You're going to get in trouble," I said, taking the strips from her and holding them to my face. They were soft and warm, and they smelled of soap, not bleach. "The Nazis are fleeing," said Julie. "I've heard whispers from the front that the front is close. We'll need to get out of here, or there will be fighting right on top of us. But right now, you should rest and get your strength up." She cleaned and disinfected Xenia's scratches. then wrapped Katerina's ankle and worked on Natalia. The three girls cuddled up together and were soon fast asleep. My feet had been sore and swollen for so long that even loose strips of cloth felt agonizingly tight, and I couldn't sleep. I sat up and looked around me. So many of us, and we were all in danger. With half-opened eyes, I watched Julie tend each new person who tumbled into the treatment room and collapsed on the floor. I marveled at her stamina and her compassion. I also wondered who was left guarding us at the camp. Most of the Nazis had fled, Julie said, but Officer Schmidt was still out there. I could hear the occasional pop, pop, pop. Was he shooting people at random? When Julie was finished treating everyone, I thought she would lie down and get some needed rest, but she left the room. I tried to stand up, but the rags were too tight, so I unwrapped the cotton from my feet, slipped on my shoes, then followed Julie down the hallway without her noticing me. She stepped into a small back office at the very end. I remembered this room as the one that the nurses and doctors had used. When she came out, she was holding a pistol and had a determined expression on her face. She looked up and gasped in surprise as she saw me standing there. "What are you doing with that gun?" "What needs to be." She spun the ammunition cylinder. "It's loaded." "When did you learn about guns?" Her eyes met mine. "There are many skills I have that you don't know about." She walked down the hallway, passing me without so much as a pause, and walked out the front door. "Julie, don't!" She flicked her hand at me dismissively and strode quickly, gun in full view at her side, to the open area of the camp. I tried to keep up with her, but my sore feet slowed me down. I got to the far end of the open area and leaned against the corner of the building. My heart was in my mouth as I watched Julie just keep walking. Officer Schmidt strutted out of one of the still standing buildings on the other side of the grounds, rifle at his side. His eyes went from Julie's face to the pistol in her hand. A wave of shock passed over his face. "Put the gun down, girl." "I don't take orders from you any more," said Julie. She pointed the pistol at his head. Officer Schmidt's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, you'll obey me. Put it down now." He raised his rifle. In a flash, Julie pulled the trigger. A loud bang cracked through the air. Officer Schmidt jerked back. He stumbled a little bit and tried to regain his balance. A patch of slick wet marked his uniform just below the shoulder. Julie wasted no time. She pulled the trigger again. This time she missed him by a long way. I saw a spiral of steam some distance behind him where the bullet hit the ground. Officer Schmidt smiled. With cruel deliberation, he aimed at Julie and squeezed the trigger. At that very moment, I heard a double boom. Julie and Officer Schmidt both fell to the ground. This time I could see blood on his cheek. I ran to Julie. A blossom of red stained the waistband of her white smock. Her eyes locked on mine, and she smiled. "You're safe now. Get out of here." Her eyes went dim. "Julie, please wake up." I fell to her side and tried to gather her in my arms, but her muscles were slack, and she felt surprisingly heavy. That's how I knew she was dead. I gently closed her eyes with my fingertips and scrabbled in the snow for a handful of dirt. I couldn't bury her, but I could not leave her here without a prayer for the dead. I sprinkled the dirt over her body and prayed the words I knew all too well.